Greetings and bienvenue, midnight crew. Thank you for returning to this broadcast, and welcome to new viewers joining us for the first time. If you like a video, then feel free to subscribe.
I used to live in spooky Central back in the days. Around 10 years old, living in the outskirts of a big Russian city. Dad was a worker in the local prison, which literally was right around the corner of our house. If I went out, I could walk along the prison walls, see armed soldiers patrol along them with guard dogs. A perfect environment to grow up as a child, you see. There were also many shady types roaming along the walls. The wall was high, but not high enough to hide the windows of the prison cells. There was a huge sign there, stating, "Communicating with the prisoners is strictly prohibited." Of course, the guys roaming along these walls did not give a fuck as long as there was no patrol in sight. You often would see some drugged-up women shouting for their imprisoned husbands, some oligarchs beside their huge SUVs speaking with their lackeys, or just some drunk idiot visiting a friend. Well, even with my 10 years, I realized that in Soviet Russia the prison personnel would not allow this shit for long. One day I went to a friend's place, who lives a good walk away on the other side of the prison. Walk along the wall and see some dude standing besides an expensive Mercedes screaming over the wall. No big deal, business as usual, mind my own stuff and go on. Suddenly the door of a guard tower in front of me opens up and a squad of armed guys streams out. I really mean dudes with their AKs loaded and baklavas over their heads, running towards the Mercedes. The dude stares at them wide-eyed while they scream at him to go down on the ground with hands on his head, rifles pointed at him. Of course he rather tries to flee, thinking he did not deserve such treatment, and jumps at the wheel, while cursing like an appropriate Russian man. The dudes from Spetsnaz do not like such jokes, and while nobody fires, one of them proceeds to run up to the Mercedes and stab the dude's tires with a bayonet. The driver now has his pants full and is surrounded by a squad of angry guys with assault rifles, and they all freeze in complete silence. All you can hear is his door unlocking and him getting out with his hands up. The soldiers handle him rather roughly and pull his stupid ass along to the guard tower. I just stand there baffled and afraid that I am going to get caught up in this as well. Nobody gives me a second glance and the stream washes into the tower, pulling in the guy and tearing his suit in the process. I shrug it off, seeing I am free to go, and go to my friend's place to smack his shit in Mortal Kombat today. Also, apparently the Mercedes vanished the next morning and I did not hear anything about this dude, nor did anyone ever try to contact prisoners over the wall again. Okay, I guess I will throw in another one, considering I could speak all day long about this weird as fuck area I lived in back then. On the other side of the prison there is a garage jungle, pretty much a huge compound with garages built in similar fashion. As far as I know, everyone was free to get himself one of them and do whatever they wanted in them. I think that it would not be far from reality to suppose that there were illegal alcohol breweries and some shots with weird shit in them. But I never went deep into the jungle, considering you could never know what could happen in there. Me and my friends rather used this to play around and do stupid shit. I had a childhood which was filled to the brim with proving your worth and being reckless, so it was just another episode on that point. We used to climb one of the garages at one point and ran above the jungle by jumping over the gaps between the garages, some of them close to 3 meters and above. It was a pretty fun thing to do if you had some friends to go along with, although we suffered some casualties. One winter we thought it would be a good idea to parkour along the garages. Outside temperature being minus 30 degrees Celsius and us in full winter gear. Despite that, we were pretty good on our feet and we happily hopped into the jungle until we lost sight of the border. Really tired out at this point and planning on going back. But one of my dumb friends decided it was a good idea to have a proof of manliness here. He demanded that everyone who has balls hanging between his legs has to jump the gap on the right, which was approximately close to 4 meters. Even in high summer it was a gruesome demand, but right here it was pure insanity. But as in any group, there is some stupid kid who always has to prove himself to the group. In this case it was a good buddy of mine, who sadly was way too blue-eyed for this world. I tried to convince him that his balls would remain at their place when he refused, but he was sure that they would shrivel from being a coward. I just called him an idiot and wished him good luck at breaking all his bones on ground impact. Garages were pretty high and there was certainty to break a leg or an arm. As he stomped along the garage, increasing velocity for the jump, some deep gruffy voice from below exploded in insults, telling us to get the fuck off his garage. Obviously people inside of those things did not like us trampling on their roofs. My friend, startled by this emotional shockwave and already tired and encumbered by his winter gear, lost much force in the jump. He stumbled on one step and looked like he hesitated, but took the jump anyway, having reached the point of no return. Despite being athletic in general, he did not make it at all. He crashed against the wall of the other garage full force and flew head down to the ground. I immediately ran up to the spot and looked down. He was blacked out on the ground and did not react to my calls. Full of panic now I climbed down the garage, not thinking about the consequences, and checked on him. His head seemed intact, but he probably knocked it hard enough to pass out. Being relieved, I faced another problem. All my other friends scattered in all directions like cockroaches and left the place, so much about having balls. And I am deep inside the creepy as hell jungle, which is dead silent and far away from anything but other garages. I decided to get some help anyway, not being able to do shit on my own. Obviously I was not going to visit the guy who was in the garage below us. So I went out to one of the streets and looked for open doors. One of them was relatively close and I ran up to it, hoping to just find some dude working on his car. Of course I did not have such luck. The garage was dark as hell and had no car inside. What I did find though was a terrible chemical stench hanging in the air, which nearly made me pass out. And a ton of bottles and canisters lined up. And finally, after pulling my scarf up to protect myself from the fumes, I looked around the corner and found someone sitting on a chair in front of a big steel bucket with some fluid inside. Having his back towards me, the figure seemed to sleep, or rest, or whatever. But a moment before I tried to call out to it, I stopped myself. Something about the way it sat there was unsettling, just not natural. I saw quite a few people passing out drunk in sitting positions, and none of them sat so stiff and leaned in such an angle. The fear that whatever I saw there was not in the realms of normal at all overcame me, and I bolted from there, telling myself that I did not see shit. Now I did not care about getting scolded by the dude in the former garage and just ran straight at it, banging against the door. The guy inside was a typical gruffy Rusky, greeting me with all kinds of unpleasantries, but listened to me after seeing my probably pale as snow face. I thought that I should tell him about the guy in the garage first, thinking he was a bigger concern there, and he immediately took off to look what was up. While he did his thing, I walked over to my friend, just to see that he is sitting there with a dumb look on his face and rubbing his head. Relieved to see that he is all right and telling him that he is a brain-rotten dumbass, I wait for the Mr. Gruff to come back. He comes around the corner after 2 minutes with a serious look on his face and tells us that he will accompany us to the border. All the way back he does not want to tell us what was up with the sitting figure in the other garage and promptly tells us to shut our mouth. We exit the jungle and say goodbye to Gruffy, who tells us he will skin us if he ever sees us in the proximity again. I concluded that this guy in the stinking garage must have been some junkie mixing some chemicals in private and got the wrong stuff into his bucket, which made him pass out and probably die in the process. It should not be surprising, but still, I did not go around those parts anymore. Who the hell knows what might be going on there today? Okay, since my other stories got a great reception, I have another story from a time later. This one is probably more related and troubled me for quite some time back then. During summer break I used to visit my granny in an old village. The village is mostly abandoned and at its deathbed, probably a ghost settlement now. There are only a few agricultural things set up there and only rural emptiness for several hundreds kilometers around. There are generally more than enough village myths going around there, about people drowning in local lakes for some reason, people hanging themselves in barns and shit like that, but that is for another day. When I visited Granny, my parents left, and so it was me and Granny there alone. And Granny was mostly busy with work at a farm or working on her cattle. It was absolute freedom for a snot-nosed kid, but it got pretty lonely, seeing that most of my friends did not seem to share my excitement with exploring the local roundabouts at night. My roaming alone ended though when my granny got herself a little puppy from a neighbor, whose dog had given birth recently. I promptly called the little one Rex, which is a dog name loved by Russians for some reason, and from now on we were always chilling together, exploring nature and abandoned facilities around the village. I preferred to go at night, and both Rex and I collected many memories together. As we sat through rainstorms under some makeshift roof I scrambled from planks, or sat beside a lake staring at the moon. Or when we just walked along a dusty road, searching for some edible berries or stuff like that. Life was good and I cried bitch tears when it was time to go back to school and say goodbye to Rex. Next year I came back and Rex already reached respectable mass, now being more aggressive, and at first he did not seem to recognize me that well. We quickly warmed up to each other though, and now we were roaming the village like before. I even introduced my partner in crime to my friends, but he did not seem to trust them at all. He was actually really fucking hostile towards some of them and did not allow anyone to touch him. So I decided it was for the best to leave Rex home when I went out to do something with my friends, especially considering there was a girl I liked back then. We still operated at nights, and now with Rex being bigger I had no trouble visiting those scary places which I avoided before. We raided old agricultural facilities which just stood there to satisfy my curiosity. I really wished I could go back there nowadays. Those things were heaven for anybody who liked abandoned buildings. One day we went inside one rather small side building, which seemed to be a storeroom of some kind, probably even a place for spare parts for work vehicles. My hands already shake with excitement as I enter the old building, which is bigger than it initially seemed. It is looted, empty of course, but there were still times where I found interesting shit to add to my collection. So I go onward with one hand on Rex's back. I can feel that he is pretty stiff, but I trust him on this one here. Suddenly he barks really loud and it echoes hard in there. My heart nearly leaps out and I get down and listen to whether there is someone here besides us. Rex now has a really deep guttural growl, which dogs seem to have before leaping at someone. I look in the direction in which his head is turned and see a staircase leading to somewhere underground. He then darts towards the stairs, while maintaining his growl, and leaps down. I just stay there and try to maintain pressure on the bladder as I shit bricks. I hear his growl from below getting louder and he barks again. Then I hear something heavy and metallic falling over on the floor and a wince from my Rex. I now regain composure and run to the stairs, but he is already darting up the stairs. I cannot see anything below. The only thing my eyes catch is my dog leaping out of complete darkness. I tell him to follow me and leg it to the exit. I do not stop after going out of course and run until my legs cannot carry me anymore. I finally fall into the grass and Rex rolls up beside me, both of us panting like crazy. After catching my breath again, I look at Rex more thoroughly, after hearing that he still whimpers quietly and his stomach is vibrating. I look at one of his back legs and he has a huge wound torn along it, bleeding pretty hard. I immediately get up and decide to carry him the rest of the way home. Fucker got pretty heavy though. So I arrived home with my arms and legs shaking like crazy and screaming for Granny. She was there immediately and already scolding me for being out that late, but stopped after seeing Rex and my clothes full of blood. After getting sure that nothing happened to me, she checked up on Rex and said that it is going to be alright. I trusted Granny because she knew her shit around animals and dropped dead in the bed that night. Rest of summer I could not get out at night anymore, as my Granny was now on overwatch and Rex was limping for the rest of the summer, but he got better rapidly and the wound seemed to close. Again we repeated the drama of us getting apart by the cruel fate as I headed back for school. I spent all the year thinking about what crazy shit we would do next summer and anticipated it like never before. But next summer was nothing like I anticipated. As I arrived, my Granny told me that Rex got sick during winter and that it was pretty heavy, he barely survived. Apparently he got a lung infection and only survived through God's kindness. He was pretty fucking big now though, got himself some intimidating physique. With his veteran scar and ferocious look in the eyes, he now was the perfect operator for summer raids. But he barely recognized me anymore and did not warm up to me like he did before. He often growled at me, and when we played he used to go out of control and scratch me pretty hard and sometimes bit too hard while playing, leaving my hands bloody more often than necessary. He also had this constant pissed off look and was even more suspicious of strangers than before. So I decided that he was far too dangerous to take with me now, considering I could barely control him and played with my friends instead. I decided it was time to warm up to this girl, who was developing into a fine woman, and we spent much time playing catch where hands landed in difficult angles, if you catch my drift. I really got close to her and we always roamed around the village and even operated on some nights, although not as thoroughly as with Rex, but cuddling a soft girl at a lake in rain was better than a dog, you know. But one day we decided to chill at my house and went past Rex. She did not know him yet and was excited to pet him. I said it was a bad idea, especially seeing that he slept, but whatever, I am here. She called out his name and his head immediately lunged upwards, his chain breaking the silence. He had this suspicious and weird look in his eyes while looking at her. And then he looked at me and I swear it now looked like he was smiling at me. Dunno how this was possible, but as far as a dog's mimics allow it, it seemed like he was smiling, but not in a good way. He seemed to warn me, or even to tell me something, his eyes now looking really puzzled. I told my friend again that approaching him was a stupid idea, but she smiled at me and gave me that prolonged please which made my heart melt. Well, okay man, but be careful. She approached my dog, who still had this animalistic grin on, and caressed him behind his ears. He seemed to enjoy it, but something about the whole picture was really wrong. Like seeing that two wrestlers have each other in a grip and one could say it is a hug. She still played around with him, smiling and asking me what I was scared of. This fucking grin on Rex's face, man, it was really unsettling at this point. He slowly but surely got on top of her while playing around and she plummeted on the ground laughing. Rex's intimidating grin was now inches apart from her face, and then my heart fucking sunk as I heard this fucking sound again. His guttural growl from before, but now really damn deep and ferocious. He growled for maybe 5 seconds and I already had my legs stiffened, preparing for the worst, my friend now silent and frozen in terror. In the next 3 seconds everything happened extremely fast and the dog tried to bite her neck, while pressing his whole body weight on her. I saw this body motion from him which dogs have when trying to tear something apart after catching it with their teeth from peripheral vision while running for his chain in my vicinity. I now heard the inhuman screaming of my friend and the feral screams of my dog as he tried to tear her neck apart. I reached the chain and yanked it with the force of 1,000 suns, throwing the dog back and cutting off his hair, which made a really ugly gurgling sound. He now tried to lunge at me, but I quickly grabbed at his collar and pressed my whole body weight on his neck. I now had my knee on Rex's neck, who still was mad beyond reasoning, and my friend was rolling around on the ground and crying hysterically, holding her face. I waited until Rex calmed down and kicked the friend into his teeth for freaking out that hard. I went over to my friend and we went to treat her wounds. Granny was not home, so I got some vodka from one of the shelves and drenched a handkerchief with it to treat the wounds. I washed out my friend's wounds, while she was sobbing and sitting on my lap. Shit was cash, yo. As it seems we got lucky that Rex only caught her forehead and cheek in the process and the bleeding was not severe. I got her bandaged up and got her home, telling her parents that she fell while we played. But concerning Rex, I was still unsure and was afraid to go near him, not knowing what his problem was all of the sudden. Having problems with strangers was not known to him, but he seemed really dangerous. And then it really hit me, he actually warned me. This smile from before was him telling, "Do not go near me or I will fucking kill you." It is pretty obvious that I never got close to him again and always had in mind where his chain allows him to go. He really tried to rip my friend's neck apart back there, and I didn't want to end up getting killed by my own dog, who got even more huge later. He also glared at me down with this smile from then on, and I certainly knew that we are not friends anymore. Still, my granny needed a guard dog and told me that if I have a problem with him I have to settle it myself. I once tried to poison him, leaving pills in his meat, but he ate up all of it and buried the pills somewhere in the ground. I do not know what caused that change, but I did not recognize my buddy anymore, although I do not know when he really died, on that day when we went to this garage, during his sickness, or somewhere at another point.
Listen man, this is not paranormal. This is just another case of Russians failing to train dogs. Just like poor kids who insist on getting Rottweilers and then are shocked when they bite someone's face off. Nothing happened to your dog except he cut himself or an animal fucked him up. Dogs forget that shit. He later matured, and since you and Granny failed to train him properly, he became aggressive and dominant instead of you being its leader. Probably also wasn't neutered. Maybe even got dem rabies. Well, even if not rabies, a severe injury or sickness can really change a dog's personality. My cousin's dog became a nervous psycho and would try to bite people a lot after she broke her leg. Even long after it had been casted and healed. Even if you pet her, you could tell she was looking out of the corner of her eye contemplating whether or not she should bite you. She'd get all stiff and stop moving completely, just from someone petting her. Dog was a cunt. She was always nice before that though.
I hope that you enjoyed tonight's broadcast. If you enjoyed tonight's story, then please subscribe to the channel, as more Greentexts will appear daily. A new broadcast will appear when the clock strikes midnight Central Time.